Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham City, hard plus difficulty, no damage walkthrough. This is going to be Reish Al Ghul, and at the same time, I'm also going to be doing Mr. Freeze. So that's two main bosses of the main story accounted for in this video, and along the way I will also be doing some side missions. So in this video, I will be able to incapacitate Riddler, I'll be indulging in the identity theft mission, and I will also be indulging in the Deadshot side missions, as well as some acts of violence against the political prisoners. And that is how this video is going to go. And with this video in particular, we're going to be going to a new area, and we're going to be fighting a new enemy type, which is the Assassin. Because what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to go to Wonder City in order to get a sample of Ra's al Ghul's blood in order to synthesize a cure for the Titan disease that is currently afflicting Batman, Joker, as well as a couple of hospitals in Gotham City. And I still don't understand the whole storyline in Batman Arkham Knight with Joker's consciousness manifesting itself in the blood of everyone who has his blood. It makes literally no sense. And also, in Batman Arkham City, Joker mentions that he's been shipping his blood out to hospitals for weeks. So why is it that the victim pool isn't higher in Batman Arkham Knight? It's only like 4 individuals alongside Batman that have this consciousness manifested within themselves because they have Joker's blood. See, that already doesn't make any sense. And furthermore, what is it that's actually causing Joker's consciousness to manifest itself? Is it just that in this fictional universe of Batman Arkham, if you have the blood of someone else, you automatically gain access to their consciousness? Or is it that the Titans somehow causing Joker's blood to gestate allowed Joker to retain his consciousness within the blood, and so his consciousness could therefore be transferred to individuals? Like, does that really make any sense to you guys? No, it doesn't. And if you ask me, it is one of the cheapest forms of storytelling ever for a game, and they had to come up with some kind of way for Joker to be in Batman Arkham Knight, because you can't have a Batman Arkham game without Joker, because Joker maintains such a high presence and is always the main villain of the Arkham games, that they had to follow that formula with Batman Arkham Knight. And they could have done so many other ways of making the Joker's legacy have an impact on Batman or on the rest of Gotham, but instead it's just a level of convenience and just a level of shortcut that just allows the story in Batman Arkham Knight to be very, very weird. And for the most part, Joker doesn't really do much to really challenge Batman's moral code in Batman Arkham Knight. He's more so just an annoying presence, just looming over Batman because of the fact that the cure that Batman took in Batman Arkham City apparently did nothing. I mean, while it did stop him from dying, apparently it didn't stop Joker's blood from actually maintaining the consciousness. So what is up with that? Why are they portraying the cure as if it didn't do anything aside from just curing Batman of the poison? And it did nothing for the mental side of it. Like, there's no sense to it. Like, what were they thinking when implementing Joker? There are so many other ways they could have done it, and it's just a jump the shark moment, it feels like, almost on that level, or a Deus Ex Machina, or just something of that ridiculous degree. And it's just one of the main factors that contributes to Batman Arkham Knight's mediocre story, and one of the main factors that contributes to Batman Arkham Knight being my least favorite of the Arkham games. And yet, despite all of that, Batman Arkham Knight has the best combat. Like, the combat in Batman Arkham Knight is definitely at its best, but when it's paired with this mediocre story and bloated world and just being forced to partake in side activities and just finding all those Riddler trophies and areas that are story crucial and they only warrant going to them once, and then you have to backtrack out of that area because the game doesn't offer any sort of fast travel ability, it really leads to a very tedious game, and it doesn't feel as good as the other games. And believe me, I'll have a lot more to say when I actually do my walkthrough of Batman Arkham Knight. And I wonder what I should do first. Should I do the main story of Batman Arkham Knight first, or should I do the DLCs? Because the DLCs are incredibly short in Batman Arkham Knight. Like, I can get through all those DLCs in about an hour, I would say, because that's how short they are. And to think as well that they would try to release such short pieces of content for money, and they're just a bunch of challenge maps, but they have a story around them. And the only parts of them that are really worth replaying are mainly the Predator encounters, when you have those big Predator encounters. like with the Red Hood DLC, the combat encounters are pretty boring, I would say. I mean, it's cool that you can just annihilate all of them with the guns, and it really captures Red Hood's like desire to just end lives very quickly. But the Predator encounter is so entertaining in the Red Hood DLC because of how quickly you can just get it done, because of how overpowered the pistols are, and with how overpowered Jason is when in that DLC. And then like the only part of the Flip of the Coin DLC I like is just the initial Predator encounter, but the rest of the DLCs is very bland and boring. That being said, though, that DLC does have the potential to crash, because I have had 2 crashes in the Flip of the Coin DLC, and I guess what was happening was I was restarting the first initial Predator encounter a little too much in the game's mind. So when I was actually making progress, the game would just crash, and it happened twice in a row. But I haven't had any crashes since because I've actually memorized the actual pattern for how you're supposed to deal with that Predator encounter. But yeah, that's really the only part of the DLC I like. And then GCPD Lockdown, where you're playing as Nightwing. It's not the most entertaining piece of content, but it's nice to go to it occasionally. You know, like fighting as Nightwing is fun, but I will say though, Nightwing can be very slow at times. And I even have this saved in a moment that I'm going to include in one of the annoying slash dumb slash like weird moments in the Batman Arkham series video series. But you know, like Nightwing at times can be a little slow when using those sticks of his, and so I end up getting hit a couple of times, and it just seems so odd that you know he's using those sticks, but then when you get a baseball bat, you're just insta downing all the enemies. It just seems like quite a dissonance right there when the baseball bat does a lot more damage than those electric sticks that Nightwing uses. And then like the Predator encounter is very simple. I only ever use silent takedowns for the Predator encounter because understanding the pattern for it is very simple. And I can't imagine why you would want to do it any other way, because I feel like that would be Nightwing's like the play style in the Predator encounters, with being like very silent and making sure he's being cautious. Like that just feels like the proper character to Nightwing, and I don't ever do it any other way, because if I do it any other way, then the sequence just becomes a little awkward. And yeah, that's really the only part of the GCPD Lockdown I like. And then you have the A Matter of Family DLC, and that DLC is very buggy. I came across a couple of bugs in the A Matter of Family DLC. I had moments where enemies were just standing around doing nothing. I had moments where Robin was stuck in a wall. Like I have those moments saved, which I'm going to be including in that video series. But it's not the most entertaining piece of content, though I will say, though, the music is a lot better in the A Matter of Family DLC. I feel like you can tell Warner Brothers was the one that made it because the soundtrack is better. Like the soundtrack has a lot of energy to it. And, you know, I will say, like Batgirl and Tim Drake are definitely a lot more entertaining in that DLC than in their portrayals in the actual main game. And can I just say that I find it very odd how little certain side characters are used in Batman Arkham Knight. Like Oracle is barely used, James Gordon is barely used, Tim is barely used. Like so many characters are barely used in Batman Arkham Knight, and considering that this is meant to be the final Arkham game, you'd want to make sure that every character is equally represented, but I feel like they lost out on a huge opportunity to flesh out the story a lot more and to really flesh out Batman's character. Because I feel like one of my main problems with Batman Arkham Knight is how little Batman changes. Like I don't feel like there's any growth in Batman's character, and like even when he gets his identity revealed and he sacrifices himself or makes it seem like he's dead to keep his friends safe, this and that, it still feels like that's just the classic Batman we all know and love from the Batman Arkham games. And I say the classic Batman we all know and love, but I really don't like Batman's portrayal in Batman Arkham Knight. I feel like he's a little too robotic. I mean, I get he's reeling from the loss of Joker, but, you know, there are just times where it feels like he's just an AI talking with Kevin Conroy's voice, and then other times he expresses a little more color with his dialogue, like when he's talking with Catwoman or when he's talking with Nightwing and the like, but it all just feels like it's placed there out of nowhere, as if to somehow keep the player intrigued by Batman. And I don't think it's that good of writing, I would say. Yeah, it's a big flaw. I feel like some of the characters are underutilized in Batman Arkham Knight, and they aren't given much screen time. And considering that it's the final Arkham game, you really need to deliver with all the characters. I mean, not just with Batman. I mean, we don't see Scarecrow much. I mean, it's easy to forget about Scarecrow when you're busy indulging in the side missions. and there's so many like side activities in the game, and they're crucial to the story progress that it's easy to forget what you're doing in the main story a lot of the times. Or like you completely forget about certain events that happen, like with Fake Oracle's death, or with Scarecrow even being a threat when you're too busy dealing with all these other threats, or even like with the Arkham Knight. And then at times when Batman talks about the Arkham Knight out of nowhere, as if like he's asking for Alfred to identify who the Arkham Knight is at the most inopportune time. It's just very, very odd choice of characters. That's just what I'll say. And it's a missed opportunity, let me tell you. But going back to what I was saying about the A Matter of Family DLC, Batgirl and Tim Drake are a lot more entertaining, I would say. And can I just say that I feel like Tim Drake gets the short end of the stick a lot, and I just feel like he's such an easy character to feel bad about, because there are just so many times where he wants to, express his more jovial personality or express some kind of personality that's not so serious, but then everyone is just telling him to shut up, this and that. And so it just feels like he's constantly sidelined and never really participating in the action or really getting the chance to express his personality. Poor guy. It must be really bad just working under Batman and just getting forced by Batman to just be a cold reptile, or even getting shut down by Barbara Gordon in the DLCs. Yeah, I feel really bad for Tim Drake. I don't know if you guys feel the same way about Tim Drake, but it really feels like he does get the short end of the stick, and he really feels like he gets shut down by a lot of people. And I know the feeling. I feel like at times when I'm trying to tell a joke to my family, they don't understand it, and at times it's like they take it a little too seriously, yet someone else says the same thing I say, and they respond to it in the way that that person is expecting, with a joking personality, like they actually laugh, this and that. But not so much in my case. If you ask me, it's like a segregation against a single individual, a term that I've come to dub as unigration, where it's not dependent upon like physical characteristics or mental characteristics or anything like that. It's just some kind of subconscious process where it just feels like you're singled out, basically, because it's you specifically, not based on your physical characteristics that you see in other people. It's just with you specifically. And I totally understand what Tim Drake is going through. I feel so bad for him. I really do. Also, fun fact about Tim Drake. I didn't actually know this, but he was voiced by Matt Mercer in Batman Arkham Knight. And Matt Mercer is the same guy who voiced Leon from Resident Evil 6. And the moment I heard that, I'm like, is that really true? But, when I first heard that, and I'm actually going through the Tim Drake sections of the DLC and just hearing his dialogue, I do hear a bit of Matt Mercer in there. But Matt Mercer is the last person I would actually think of. In fact, in the Harley Quinn's Revenge DLC for Batman Arkham City, he's voiced by Troy Baker, yet Troy Baker voices Jason Todd in Batman Arkham Knight, so I wonder why he was changed like that. It might seem a little confusing to people if they've actually come off that DLC and they go straight into Batman Arkham Knight. But it doesn't affect me much because I barely play that DLC. Harley Quinn's Revenge is a very boring piece of content. And you might have noticed in that video I uploaded of annoying, dumb, weird moments in the Batman Arkham series that I showcased content from that DLC. And I was actually going through that DLC a couple of days ago, and I just wanted to see what it was like, because I can't remember the last time I played that DLC. Because if I don't have any memory of that DLC, then it must mean that I've only played that DLC once, and for good reason too, because the DLC is incredibly stale, boring, and just completely unimaginative. And I can't stand Batman's voice, like just his soft voice, and it just makes it very hard to hear him, and it's just incredibly moody. I just feel like it's a little forced. Like I feel like even though Batman is reeling from the loss of Joker and Talia, you could deliver a better voice than that. Surely that doesn't feel shoehorned in. I don't like the way his voice sounds. And moving past that, the activities that you're doing in Harley Quinn's Revenge feel so contrived, and you've just seen these kind of objectives before in the previous games, and it just feels very unimaginative, and they just reuse some ideas from the main game, and it doesn't play very well. I hate Robin. His gameplay feels so limited to Batman, and he feels way slower than Batman, and you can really feel it. Like when you're trying to do a beatdown animation on a thug when you're playing as Robin, the startup frames for the animation are slightly longer compared to Batman. Like when you're doing a beatdown animation that's Batman, like when you're first starting it, the initial frames for starting the animation, it's like there are no initial frames for Batman. But then when you go to these other characters like Catwoman and Robin, there's like a couple of frames inserted into the initial startup frames of that animation that just make the beatdown animation feel kind of slow to start. And you really notice this in other animations as well with Robin, and he feels way slower compared to Batman. And then that plus the other annoying problems I was encountering with that DLC that you likely saw with the fundamental problems present in Batman Arkham City. And then like with the reused objectives and the unimaginative objectives and just the completely pointless story that doesn't really contribute to anything at all substantial to Batman Arkham Knight. It's just a throwaway piece of content. I really don't like that DLC. And I'm going to be doing a walkthrough of it after I do the main game of Batman Arkham City. And I'm going to probably have nothing but negative things to say about that DLC because I hate it. And it's just a trend with a lot of the Arkham games. The DLCs for the Batman Arkham games tend to always be average or mediocre, nothing truly exceptional. And the same is unfortunately said with Batman Arkham Knight's DLCs because they all feel very average and not that interesting. Oh, also right there, you have to hit the question mark on the left, because if you hit the question mark on the right, you'll electrify yourself. This was definitely the one Riddler hostage area where I had to restart twice. The first time was because I hesitated trying to get through that area where the walls are coming down on you, because I wasn't sure when you were supposed to slide, or I totally forgot you were supposed to slide for the second part. And then the other part was when I accidentally hit the second question mark and I electrified myself. Nothing really that bad. These Riddler hostage areas are very easy, so you won't struggle with them whatsoever. But going back to what I was saying, the DLCs for the Arkham games are always very average, and the Batman Arkham Knight DLCs are no exception in that case. They fall into that category greatly, because they feel like one-off DLCs. They don't exactly contribute much to the main story of Batman Arkham Knight after the events of Batman Arkham Knight. You just hear some side bits here and there. You hear about Tim and Barbara's wedding, and Nightwing hasn't changed at all. You're hearing all this stuff about villains being recaptured, and it feels like Gotham City hasn't really changed much under James Gordon's leadership as mayor. So what exactly was the whole point of Batman sacrificing himself? That's just my main gripe with the DLCs for Batman Arkham Knight, and you know they get old after a while once you replay them a couple of times, and they're fun to go back to every so often, but playing them like repeatedly in a short duration is not that fun. And that's just something that the Arkham games have never really got off the ground properly with. I mean, the only decent piece of DLC content I like is Cold Heart from Batman Arkham Origins, where you're taking on Mr. Freeze and you're taking on those Freeze enemies where they have access to the cryo gun that Freeze uses. And so you also gain access to the XE suit because of the fact that you're dealing with cryo-based weaponry. And the XE suit looks amazing in Batman Arkham Origins. I especially like the choice of a robotic filter for Batman's voice. And the suit looks badass. And the honeycomb structure that is given to that suit without increasing weight, and just the way the suit looks in general. I really love the way the XE suit looks in Batman Arkham Origins when you're playing that DLC. And, you know, like, just going through Goth Corp, hearing the music, and then, you know, doing that boss fight with Freeze is fun. I mean, is it exceptional? No. It's not that exceptional of a DLC, but at least it's content. And it's better content than what we get with Harley Quinn's Revenge. And Harley Quinn's Revenge is filled with some very annoying sections. Like, for instance, there's a sequence in Harley Quinn's Revenge where you have to interrogate 3 of these Harley informants without knocking them out. And I don't know why this is a thing that Rocksteady does with their games, but when it comes to interrogating certain informants, you can actually knock them out. Why? Why can you knock them out? And it's not like you have the ability to control whether Batman attacks that guy or not, because at times Batman will attack that guy for no reason. And also, if you end up accidentally knocking over that guy and doing the multi-ground takedown, you'll accidentally knock him out. But in Batman's mind, if that informant is so important, he would not be prioritizing that enemy. But because what Batman thinks has nothing to do with the gameplay, there are just a lot of those annoying moments where you accidentally knock out an informant because Batman does the wrong animation on the wrong guy. And it's really frustrating, and you're forced to limit yourself in combat a bit. Whereas in Arkham Origins, you want to know what they did that was very smart? you could be as liberal as you want with the informants, but if you ended up doing an animation that would normally knock out a henchman, with the informants, they just immediately go into a surrendering state. Or if you do like a ground finish or a takedown animation on the informants, Batman does a unique animation where he floors them to the ground and he puts them into a surrendering posture. So why is it that Warner Brothers came up with a fantastic idea of not limiting yourself in combat and not feeling frustrated over the way it's so easy to knock out informants, yet Rocksteady didn't bother following suit with Arkham Knight? Why? And in Harley Quinn's Revenge, especially with that particular part of the mission, if you knock out the informants, it's an instant fail, and you go into that death scene, and you saw in that one video I uploaded of the dumb moments from the Arkham series, but I froze the informant using the freeze grenade, and I also knocked out a guy right next to him. So I was going in for the ground finish, but Batman prioritized the informant and knocked him out. Why? So I ended up failing the mission because the game prioritized the wrong animation. Even though I was crouched, and even though I pressed triangle, it prioritized the ice smash takedown, and I knocked out the informant, and I failed, and I had to restart. And that one informant alone, the one that is paired with those other three gunmen just walking around together, that is the worst Riddler informant. It's so limited in how you're supposed to do it, and you have to play the waiting game a lot. And the guys that are not even part of the Predator encounter involving that Riddler informant, like the guys down below on street level, they can actually spot you if you decide to do a loud takedown. And because they're classed as enemies not in a predatory encounter and they're in a combat encounter, if I do a loud takedown in the middle of that Predator encounter, they just immediately know where I am, and this allows the enemies in the Predator encounter that I'm doing to know where I am, and they shoot me. And I showcase that in my video, and it's just one of the most questionable design choices ever with Harley Quinn's Revenge, and it's so obnoxious going through that section over and over again. And it's just one of the main contributing factors to Harley Quinn's Revenge being a very lackluster piece of content, and then having that whole system where Rocksteady didn't even bother putting in some kind of system to actually knock out informants, not directly incapacitate them. That just doesn't make any sense at all. But right now, I've done all the Riddler hostages, so I'm going to be able to take down Riddler. You notice how streamlined this feels? You notice how optimized this path feels? You notice how much it doesn't feel like a ludonarrative dissonance, just having to waste time just doing all these Riddler challenges and trophies, and I can actually save the hostages, and it just makes sense for them to actually be standing even after all that walking, because it feels like they've been walking for, like half an hour, rather than doing all those challenges and riddles, and it just feels like they've been walking for hours upon hours, and it's like, how are they still standing? And it just feels like Batman's being very cruel to them with how much he's just wasting time doing all these challenges and riddles. It's just, I'm so glad that we can do this in an optimized fashion, in a way that actually feels like it has a sense of pace to it on New Game Plus, rather than doing it on New Game where you're just forced to do all those challenges. I'm so glad I made a save file that just allows me to get to New Game Plus immediately, rather than having to do the original New Game every time. But that right there, Batman does acknowledge that he's been hit by the electric fence when you're doing that method of getting over it. I think that's the only possible way to get over that electric fence, or maybe you can do some strategic gliding to get over it, but you don't take any damage from it, if you're wondering. Now for this part right here, the hostages, they're going to be actively walking around on these conveyor belts, and you cannot get in their way. If you get in their way, they'll die, and you'll fail. So you just got to take the path exactly like how I'm taking it, and try to make sure your timing is correct. The timing can be a little different depending on how fast you enter this area. But it's relatively simple, although I will say there are some close call moments, I would say. Like right here, this was very dangerous. Try to make sure that when you're in this spot, you pick the time where there's a larger gap between these two hostages. That way you'll run less risk of accidentally detonating the bomb in these helmets. And there was some beeping just then, but as long as you're far enough in that corner, you won't detonate the explosive. I'm not sure how many beeps it takes before the explosive finally blows, but I've never failed this section to even see that happen. But we're right under Riddler, and we'll be able to incapacitate him without him ever knowing we were there. And that is the end of this side mission right here. And from here, we're going to go back into the open world, and we're going to head straight for Wonder City. And there's something I'd like to talk about with regards to the open world in the Batman Arkham games, specifically with Batman Arkham City and Arkham Origins, because Arkham Knight didn't have this problem. But one thing that I really don't like about progressing the main story in Batman Arkham City and Arkham Origins is in the open world, the rooftops tend to have a lot more gunmen. And because of this, the chances of you accidentally stumbling into an enemy with a gun and they'll just immediately shoot you because in Predator situations, the enemies with guns react to you so quickly that they'll be able to shoot you very quickly. It's rather obnoxious. And also, even when you get away from the enemies that have the guns, because of the fact that the enemies are so omniscient and their AI nature just allows them to perfectly hit you, even when you're flying away, if they still have line of sight, they'll still track you effortlessly. And even if you're slightly dodging the bullets, you're going to most likely get hit. It's so easy for the enemies to hit you because of their AI nature. And I've never liked that about the open world whenever you're progressing the main story in Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Origins. Because what it forces you to do is it forces you to have detective vision out for a large percentage of the open world when you've reached that point where there are so many gunmen out in the open world. And I think it's more of a problem in Arkham Origins, given that the city in Arkham Origins is larger than Arkham City. But there are just a lot of rooftops in Arkham Origins that get populated by gunners. And if you accidentally stumble into them, it's just so cheap. It's really cheap. And it just kind of forces you to limit yourself in the flying sections. And it really doesn't make any sense for there to be this many guns. I mean, you're progressing the main story, you're removing a lot of the major criminal elements. Why would there be gunners out on the roofs? As if, like, nothing has changed. As if they're getting stronger as the story progresses. It's so confusing in that sense. And the thing is that Rocksteady designed the detective vision in Batman Arkham City, and Warner Brothers followed suit with the same detective mode in Batman Arkham Origins. But Rocksteady said that when they were designing detective vision in Batman Arkham City, they noticed in a lot of gameplay of Batman Arkham Asylum that there were a lot of players that remained in detective vision for an extended period of time. And the reason for this was because of the coloration provided by detective vision. You'll notice in Batman Arkham Asylum that when you go into detective vision, the coloration, it doesn't make it hard to actually see things in the open world. If anything, you can still see everything clearly in the open world. And the coloration provided by detective vision in Batman Arkham Asylum didn't really clash with the coloration provided by the open world when you weren't using detective vision. So because of this, it was easy to remain in detective vision for an extended period of time. And I myself am a victim of this because I always forget that I'm in detective vision because of the way that the coloration doesn't contrast with the open world in Batman Arkham Asylum. And Rocksteady noticed this, so what they did was they changed the coloration of detective vision so that it'd be darker, and it'd be a little bit harder to see certain things in the open world. And because of this very stark contrast in quality in the way the visuals looked, this is what allowed players to not be so over-reliant upon detective vision or remain in detective vision for an extended period of time. So I totally understand that mentality, but it completely clashes with the mentality of putting in so many gunners on the rooftops. Because when it's so easy to stumble into gunners on the rooftops in the open world as the main story progresses, you'll be remaining in detective vision for an extended period of time to ensure that you don't accidentally stumble into enemies. And even then, it's not reliable because the draw distance on detective vision can be a little cumbersome, because even when enemies are in the correct range to actually be identified in detective vision, sometimes they don't show up. And so you're going to a building and they just show up out of nowhere, and you end up getting punished because of that. But that's a separate thing entirely. But this is why I don't understand, or at least one of the main reasons why I don't understand why they bother putting in so many gunners into the open world as the main story progresses, because it completely clashes with that whole mentality that they were trying to set with detective vision in Batman Arkham City, and Batman Arkham Origins was even worse with the amount of gunners that you were dealing with. And it's just something that is so frustrating, and the amount of times you'll accidentally stumble into gunners on the rooftop and you'll get punished, it's rather obnoxious. And that pretty much summarizes why I despise the fact that you get more gunners on the rooftops as the main story progresses. Ooh, also, this is a very interesting part right here. Not this part right here. This part, if you place multiple explosive gel at different points on the floor, you'll hit multiple enemies, and you'll be able to incapacitate a lot more than just using one explosive gel. I saw Batman Arkham videos do this, and it's very reliable. But this Predator encounter coming up, I had a weird bug happen. I had a scripting error where for some reason, I guess I did the sequence a little too fast. So the scripting that is supposed to happen, where you're supposed to rescue Fiona and just bring her up here, it never played. So the Predator encounter wouldn't end, and I couldn't even get through the door to allow me to progress the main story because of this weird scripting error, and I've included it in the blooper section in the final part of this video. But we'll talk about that at some point. But right there, you need to disable that guy's gun, use a freeze grenade on the other guy right over there, and then use a smoke pellet on these 3 enemies. Use your remote electric charge to knock that armored enemy off the ledge, because there's no elevator blocking the way. And then take out the other 2 enemies. This guy will not have the chance to deal with you because he has his weapon disabled, which is good. But it was around here that the scripting error happened, because I went to knock out that frozen enemy, and I guess I did it rather quickly, and Joker was saying things as well. Like he says dialogue, like this quote right here where he's indicating that a henchman is down. He said this at the same time I knocked out this guy, and maybe that contributed in some part to the scripting error that I had, but I don't know why it happened. I'm guessing it's because of that. But you'll notice right here, I'm just taking my time, and I'm just waiting it out so that I don't get the scripting error again. And I thought enemies in Predator encounters were permanently frozen by the freeze grenade, but it turns out there is a timer. It's just the timer is extended during Predator encounters rather than during combat encounters. So I almost got shot by that guy, but I was able to freeze him again, and I took him out. And there, that's what the scripting is supposed to do. You're supposed to be able to rescue Fiona and bring her up there, but the scripting didn't play, and I couldn't get through that door that you saw me going through. And we're now inside of Wonder City, and this is where we're going to get introduced to a new enemy type, which are the Assassins. And these are swordsmen that you see in Batman Arkham Origins and Batman Arkham Knight. And in Batman Arkham Knight, they're known as combat specialists, but they work exactly the same, aside from a couple of really annoying context-sensitive attacks that they can do, where they bounce off of enemies and walls in Batman Arkham Knight, and it can really mess with the combat at times. I'm not a big fan of that. But the Assassins. There are 2 different counters that you have to do against the Assassins. There's the blade dodge counter or the normal counter where you just tap triangle. Without the counter indicators, it can be a little confusing, but trust me guys, it's not so bad. There's a very specific animation that the Assassins do when they're trying to do the attack that requires a blade dodge counter. And it's when they hold their sword to their back, and they're just taking quite a while to actually attack you like they're in slow motion. It's a very easy animation to recognize, and you'll see it immediately. But one thing that I've really noticed about the Assassins on this game, and I noticed it as well in Batman Arkham Knight, but the Assassins on this game, they have different speeds regarding their blade dodge attacks. So it can be very confusing if they decide to do a very fast slash combo or a slow slash combo. And because of this difference, and you don't know what to expect, it can be very easy to mess up the timing on your blade dodge counter to actually take out these enemies instantly. So bear that in mind when you're trying to go for the blade dodge counter. And, you know, I got screwed by this a couple of times, and I just wanted to encounter this scenario plenty more times. So I'm trying to make sure that I don't go into free flow combat with these enemies. And I'm mainly trying to use the blade dodge takedown against these enemies. But this right here, I'm just trying to counter them because I'm hoping one of them will do the blade dodge counter. And they're still not doing it. And one thing you have to note about the Assassins is that they are able to dodge gadgets. And this right here, that's one of my main issues with the Assassins on this game and in the next Arkham games. Because of the way the animations are handled with these enemies, there are just times where they can kind of go through you, and I imagine it's because they're trying to clash with the protocol that's given to them, where they have to dodge your attack. Because randomly the Assassins will dodge your attacks. I'm guessing because the game had trouble prioritizing which system it wanted to favor. That's why I had that moment where I went right through the Assassin, and I'm amazed she didn't hit me, but I hit her. It was a lingering hitbox. It's one of my main problems with the Assassins, pretty much. And it's something you'll notice a lot more in Batman Arkham Knight, because when the combat specialists jump off of enemies or they jump off of walls, they can at times track you when you're in the middle of attack animations. They have a very similar paired animation system where, regardless of distance, they'll always be able to hit you unless you do a very specific kind of animation or evade animation that allows you to cancel out that paired animation nature. And it's something that the enemies have in general in the Batman Arkham games, but you notice it a lot more with the assassins, where the paired animation system just allows them to glide towards you, and so they don't have to worry about spacing. It's all because of the rigid method of forcing you to use the counter or the evade in order to cancel out the paired animation system that the enemies favor. And it's something that can be very frustrating. I've demonstrated it a couple of times in my annoying/dumb/weird moments video of the Batman Arkham series with Part 1, and you'll probably see a lot more in the upcoming videos. But here is Ra's al Ghul, or rather, this is a hallucination that we're experiencing because this is Batman's first time actually drinking Lazarus, and Lazarus is what allows Ra's al Ghul to live for 600 years. It's a naturally occurring chemical in the earth that just grants him something equivalent to immortality, but at the same time, it degrades his mental state. So that's why he becomes a lot more insane in the later games. But essentially for this task, you just need to follow Ra's Spectre throughout this area, and you have to make sure you don't touch anything along the way. The only thing you can touch is the crystal that I'm stood on. If you touch anything along the way, you will die. And lo and behold, the portal that I go into that leads on to the next area, I died in the next area because I messed up when I was supposed to disengage my dive bomb. And it's really cool being able to use the dive bomb to actually traverse the city in a way that requires physics. Ooh, and also something I should probably mention about dive bombing is it's actually useful during Predator encounters, because the enemies can actually hear you if you actually land on the ground during a dive bomb animation. And like when Batman does the animation where he slams his hand into the ground, and you can initiate the shockwave if you have the ability for that. Like that whole animation that you do, it makes noise. And this is actually very helpful in Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight. I don't think so much in Arkham Origins, though, because I haven't really found the time to experiment with dive bombing and use it as a way to make noise. But in Arkham Knight, there are certain Predator encounters that can really benefit from this. Like, there's a Predator encounter in the A Matter of Family DLC when you have to rescue those cops from the Ferris wheel, where the second phase of that encounter, if the enemies aren't immediately rushing me up a ladder, I use the dive bomb to make noise, and then I get them to come up the ladder, and then I just knock them off with batarangs, and it's so hilarious, and it's a lot of fun to do. I'm definitely going to showcase it in my walkthrough of the A Matter of Family DLC. But to think as well that I had to accidentally make noise in Batman Arkham Knight with the dive bombing to even discover that dive bombing made noise. And it's great as well that they haven't changed the system, because since I discovered it in Batman Arkham Knight, I tested it in Batman Arkham City, and it works. So if you're wanting to do something very creative with the Predator encounters, try using dive bombing to make noise. It's probably a lot better than using the knockdown smash, because I think one of my main problems with the knockdown smash, when you just press triangle and then you press square, is sometimes the enemies don't immediately rush to where you are. They're kind of hesitant to go and investigate the noise that is generated by the knockdown smash. Whereas with the dive bomb, I feel like the enemies are a lot more consistent in actually investigating the noise generated by the dive bomb. So bear that in mind when you decide to experiment with it in the Predator encounters. But whenever you hear Ra's laughing, it means that you're going to be dealing with swordsmen, and they work exactly the same like the assassins, only occasionally you'll be able to stun these guys with gadgets. But did you see that? Did you see the animation he did before he initiated that blade dodge combo? It's a very slow animation, and you'll recognize it. Like it's not that hard to recognize. It's actually very easy to recognize. I know Serpent17 struggles with that, and he says that the assassins / combat specialists in the Arkham games just break the flow of the combat. And occasionally they do with me, which is why I mainly use the cape stun on them and just use the beatdown. Which, by the way, the cape stun will always hit the assassin, so they'll never dodge the cape stun. You can just use that as a way to get a guaranteed hit on them. And then with recognizing the attacks, you can easily recognize the animations. But after some exposition, we're fighting Ra's al Ghul in this fight, and this is a decent fight. I do like this fight. I mean, it's primarily just dealing with the swordsman. You see the animation? You see how slow it was? And he had his sword at his back? That's the animation that indicates that he's going to do the blade dodge attack. And Raish will occasionally try to attack you and you have to evade. He mainly attacks after you take down a swordsman, or when you knock him away. And also, when you go into the free flow evade, where you jump over an enemy's head, you're completely invulnerable to Raish. She will never be able to damage you, which is really good design. It's something that wasn't in Batman Arkham Asylum, and it really made certain encounters, like with Bane, very, very obnoxious. But we get into this phase, and you have to use the remote electric charge to damage Raish in this phase. And on this difficulty, Raish has access to the Sword Slam immediately. He only gains access to the Sword Slam in the second phase on the other difficulties, but just bear that in mind. And this part is not so bad. The throwing stars are easy to avoid. It's just those blades that are on the ground. I think they are the ones that are most problematic, even though I've never been hit by them. But just keep firing the remote electric charge at him, and most of those shots will be able to hit Raish. There's one specific space between those terracotta soldiers that you can actually sneak the remote electric charge through, and you'll be able to hit Raish. And now we get on to the second phase, and for the second phase, the enemies will go into that state where they will come out of the ground and just immediately try to slam you, but if you mash the counter button, you'll be able to counter all of them and knock them away. And I feel like this phase is easier because of the fact that this exists, because it contributes to your combo. So you can immediately do a gadget attack, or you can just do a normal takedown animation in order to speed up the process. And that right there was very lucky. I'm lucky I went into the takedown animation to avoid that blade dodge attack. But I tried to use the remote electric charge to stun a bunch of enemies, because I never really use the remote electric charge while in free flow focus. It does work occasionally, but then there are times when the enemies just dodge the shot because they behave like the assassins. And I think it's best you remain in free flow combat just so you have that slow motion. I mean, it's not so helpful when you're trying to dodge the blade attacks, because it can mess up your timing when you're doing the blade dodge counter with slow motion. And also, I'm not a big fan of when it transitions into reality, like those little flashes where Batman is attacking Raish directly. I feel like because it kind of throws you off a bit, and because of the way it looks, it can distract you from the fight. Like, I wish it didn't happen. I just wish it only happened occasionally, not like all the time, because it's really distracting. And there's just 2 more of these guys I have to deal with. I'm just going to finish this guy off with a beatdown, and then I'm just going to take out this guy right here. And then we have to fight Giant Raish again with the remote electric charge. And it's exactly the same as the first phase. So once again, try to make sure that you're dodging the ninja stars and also the slam that Raish does with his sword. Try to make sure you're avoiding the blades on the ground, and just keep firing your remote electric charge, and you'll most likely hit Raish. And that will be the end of this part of the boss fight, and then you'll just go into a phase where you just mash triangle like crazy to counter all of Raish's sword strikes, and that will be the end of the entire boss fight. And like I said, it's a very fun boss fight. It's not exceptional. It's not as interesting as Clayface, in my opinion. I feel like Clayface is a better fight, because I feel like the integration of the anti-free flow elements is a lot more interesting with Clayface in this first phase compared to Raish in this part. And also, the part where Batman uses the sword in the last part of Clayface's boss fight is a really unique set piece for the game, because you never see Batman use a weapon, and he actually gets to use a sword in the final phase of that entire encounter. And that's why I consider Clayface to be better than Ra's al Ghul. But use the reverse batarang to knock him out. And I'm just going to skip on ahead to this part where there's a Predator encounter that you can choose to do or just skip. I choose to do it because it feels wrong to ignore it. And I'm just going to take it nice and slow. Batman Arkham videos would actually just pull off that guy with the Batclaw, and then the enemies would just rush over to him. But I choose to take it nice and slowly right here. And there's a couple of armored guys. You can just use the remote electric charge to deal with them and just knock them out. There's also a couple of guys with thermal goggles, which I haven't talked about, but there's an ability on this game that will allow you to be immune to thermal goggles when you're sitting on vantage points, because the thermal goggle enemies can actually scan vantage points and actually see where you are if you don't have the upgrade. But in all honesty, guys, the thermal goggles don't do enough to be a valid threat. They're just kind of there for the sake of being there rather than actually contributing to something dangerous. But that right there was really cool. I knocked off that guy with the remote electric charge, and because his armor conducted the electricity, he just went flying. And because he fell off a ledge, he went down. And how convenient that he landed right on top of a mine, and I was able to use that disruptor in order to destroy the mine and just take out that armored guy. Like, that right there was pure luck. That was not skill right there. That was luck. But I'm still glad I made the video anyway. But I'm going to use a freeze grenade to stun this guy, and before his friend can free him, I'm going to make sure I deal with his friend. And I'm going to disrupt his weapon. This is where the detection's kind of screwing me because it has a soft lock on it. It's not like you can freely aim the thing. It's just you got to make sure the soft lock registers on an enemy so that it registers the weapon that you want to jam. And it's cool that it does that, but at the same time, it can be a little annoying if it prioritizes the wrong guy. But you won't get into that situation much, so don't think of it. And this is where we're going to get introduced to shield guys. Officially, this is where the game would introduce shield guys, but of course, we've been encountering shield guys throughout New Game Plus. I don't really understand why this is a thing with Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Knight. I didn't notice it as much with Batman Arkham Origins. But the games just have this tendency of introducing enemy types so late into the story. Like, you know, with the stun rod guys, like, we get introduced to the stun rod guys in Batman Arkham City when Protocol 10 is happening. And then in Batman Arkham Knight, we get introduced to the stun rod guys in the Arkham Knight's lair, but we've been encountering stun rod guys in the side stories. But why is the game treating it like it's a tutorial? This applies to both games. I don't know why it does this, where in any logical game, they would introduce these enemy types very early in the story. Or when it comes to introducing enemy types, the enemy types they introduce later on in the story are actual threats, not like common enemies that have special weapons. So why does it do that? That's something that I've never understood with Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Knight. And right here, we're doing a combat encounter. You'll notice right here, I'm not even trying to use my punch animation. I'm just trying to build up my combo using the combo batarang when I jump over enemies in order to gain the ability to do the seek and destroy ability to actually destroy the shields and other annoying weapons. Because there's nothing more frustrating than having those weapons be active in the map and then you accidentally prioritize that enemy with a strike animation, or their animation is faster than yours, because Batman's very slow when he's doing his strike animations, and it's very, very frustrating when it happens. And this is something that none of the side characters have. None of the side characters have the ability to do the seek and destroy ability. This is something I don't understand. Why do the side characters have such limited options compared to Batman? And their choice of moves is so limited to Batman. They have very inferior gadgets to Batman. Like, did you see that just then? That right there was the free flow focus explosive gel. You can go into free flow focus as Robin in Harley Quinn's Revenge, yet he doesn't have access to the free flow focus gadget ability. So you can't augment his explosive gel to just take out multiple enemies. Why? Why do they do this? Why would they remove one of the creative elements to the fight? Like, why would they sacrifice so much creativity with the combat capabilities of the side characters just to make them different to Batman? It doesn't make any fucking sense. I really don't understand that. And it's the case with every single side character except for Azrael. Azrael is the only character that I can actually tolerate because he's just a reskin of Batman's moveset, but he's faster. And he has all the moves that Batman can do. Why that's not the case with the other side characters, and why the side characters don't have any kind of special ability that could be on par with some of the other abilities that Batman has, there is no reason you can give as to why that should not be a thing. The side characters should be on the same level as Batman, so that they're equally as fun to play as. But because the side characters are so inferior to Batman, they're not fun to play as in the slightest. And it's not just a matter of being fun or not. Batman's capabilities are actually proportional to the kind of encounters that he deals with. But when you're putting in side characters in very similar kinds of sections, and they have none of the moves that just allow the combat to be balanced, and just allow you to not be screwed by the basic errors that plague the Arkham games, that's really where a line is drawn between the side characters and Batman, because the problems that exist with the combat systems in the Arkham games are amplified even more by playing as side characters that are afforded disadvantages just based on the fundamental framework of how they're designed. That is really where I do not like the side characters, not just based on the fun aspect, but also based on the functional design aspect. And that's all I have to say about that particular tangent until I decide to bring it up again in a later video, because I most likely will. But right now, we have just rescued Quincy Sharp, and we now have to make our way back to Mr. Freeze. But before I do that, I'm going to partake in some of the side activities, like going to Bane and telling him that the Titan containers are destroyed. And then there's also the side activity where you can get the Disruptor upgrade for disabling mines and detonating them. Although I already have that ability, but it's still a side mission on New Game Plus. And I think this is as good a time as any to really talk about the length of this game, because really, like, after you beat Ra's al Ghul, you're like 70% done. All that's left to do is Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn and the Steel Mill, and then the fight with Joker, and then you have Protocol 10, and then you have the end of the game. So there's not much left in the main story, and you know how I mentioned before that the main story of Arkham City is relatively short compared to Batman Arkham Asylum because of the fact that it favors the open world format and it's juggling with side activities? I'm sure you can totally understand what I mean when I say that. I mean, this is the third video in this Batman Arkham City walkthrough, whereas my Batman Arkham Asylum walkthrough, it took a lot more videos to actually get the game done, because there was a lot more focused content that was worthy of individual videos. Whereas here, even when I'm trying to focus on the individual stuff, I mean, alongside the side activities, it still doesn't change the fact that the main story is very short in this game. And it's surprising, you know, you'd expect the main story to be longer than the other side activities put together, but it really feels like this game is 50% main story and 50% side story, and it really shouldn't be an even ground like that. But I guess that didn't really concern Rocksteady, and I'm not too sure how I feel about it. I don't know whether to hate it or just not think about it at all, because maybe the main story of Arkham City could have been a little bit better if it had some more focus elements to it, but even though there are those focus elements, there's still not enough to it. But then again, if it would have been like Batman Arkham Knight, with just being very, very long, and you're just having to deal with so many villains, that's probably what it would have been like. So maybe I shouldn't be thinking of it. But maybe the story could have done with a lot more meat. That's probably what I'll say about Arkham City, and that's all I'm going to say on that particular tangent. And I guess I'll talk about other things not related to the Batman Arkham series. So recently, I just did a dual commentary with my friend for Assassin's Creed 1. We finally finished up that series. We spent almost a year, and that was mainly because we were spending a lot of time in between videos just doing other things, but to finally get it done is great. And I intend to post a dual commentary of Assassin's Creed 2 on my channel with my friend. I mean, we've already posted the first two parts of the Assassin's Creed 2 dual commentary series, but it's been almost a year since we've even thought of doing it again, and I've just recorded part 3. Although I will say, though, the live commentary format that I decided to do with Assassin's Creed 2 is probably not the best choice. I mean, for Assassin's Creed 1, because I can't record AC1 on PS4 and PS5, my friend had to use Elgato in order to record Assassin's Creed 1, so we had to make a pre-recorded video, and then we would overlay the commentary above that. And really, that format was just a lot more beneficial for commentary purposes, because there was just so much to say, and it didn't feel like we were just wasting time just getting distracted by what was happening in the gameplay because it was a pre-recorded video. I'd be distracted by the gameplay a lot more in a live commentary rather than in a pre-recorded video just doing commentary above that. So I'm going to definitely change the format of this Assassin's Creed 2 dual commentary series to a pre-recorded video with commentary over it, just so the commentary is a lot more fleshed out and it doesn't feel like we're pausing every 2 seconds, and it doesn't feel like that we're just struggling to come up with tangents. That's definitely what I'll do for that. Because I look at it this way. My walkthroughs that I do, you'll notice that I don't do live commentaries of games, and when I do live commentaries of games, it's always a playthrough, not a walkthrough. But it's just I'm able to get my thoughts out in a more cohesive manner. I'm able to actually talk at a modest pace, but not too slow or too fast. And I'm just able to get a lot of thoughts out. And anytime I need to get a thought in and make sure I'm not creating large gaps in the commentary that make it seem like I've just paused for no reason, I can just stop what I'm recording for the voice clip and just record a new one. And that's the whole benefit of Share Factory, and I gotta give credit to Sony for that. And that cohesiveness and that sort of structured format to the commentary just allows the commentary to be delivered in a better fashion. It has a lot more focus, it has a lot more cohesion, it has a proper sense of pace to it. That's definitely what I'll be doing for the formatting of my Assassin's Creed 2 dual commentary series for my friend. So that is how it's going to be for Assassin's Creed 2. But I mentioned before I was going for Bane, but I'm actually not. I'm going to actually go and do Mr. Freeze. And Mr. Freeze is a very fun fight. A lot of people consider him to be the best boss in the entire Arkham series, and I 100% agree, because it's an anti-free flow fight done right. However, I was encountering some issues with Freeze. For some reason, I'd be getting moments where Freeze just wouldn't move. He would not be tracking my footsteps. And I don't know if it's because I activated Detective Vision, and on New Game Plus, Freeze has the ability to disable your detective vision, and if you spend too long in detective vision, he'll disable it. But I don't know if that causes him to go into a unique animation where he's trying to disable the detective vision, so maybe that's why I get those moments where he doesn't walk. I don't know, but there is just some very unusual behavior that I was getting with Freeze, and I don't know why, but here's the pattern that I do. I first used the Disruptor on Freeze, and because I'm restarting the checkpoint, and this game has this whole bug where the video doesn't load in immediately once you actually load into the map, I was getting moments where Freeze came very close to hitting me, so I had to move backwards and use the Disruptor to ensure he wouldn't hit me with his ranged projectiles. Then what I do is I stand right over there and I use the remote electric charge in order to activate this magnet, and it will incapacitate him again, so I'm just going to do the beatdown. And then the third thing that I'm going to do right here is I am going to use the explosive gel in order to break down this wall on top of him. And what you need to know about Freeze is that you have to vary your methods, because one method will not work multiple times on Freeze. He will adapt to that method. So this is what makes this fight so unique to every other boss in the Batman Arkham series. The game forces you to use all the predatory skills you have in order to take down Freeze. And did you notice how that time he came over to the wall? Well, in my first attempt at this fight, he didn't come immediately. He immediately deployed the heat seekers to track my location rather than tracking my footprints. I think it was because I activated my detective vision, so be careful of that. But make sure you're taking the paths exactly like how I'm doing them, so that your thermal footprints are actually showing up in the correct spots to influence Freeze's pathing. So because of the way I was pathing, I was able to get behind him to do a silent takedown on him. Now what I'm going to do is run away. I'm going to climb up here, and he's going to come right under me. Do the drop takedown. Do not do the silent takedown. Do the drop takedown right over here. So he's down. I'm going to do the beatdown on him. And then watch this path. Watch the path that I take when I'm trying to set him up for this takedown right over here. This is the ceiling takedown. So there's a glass ceiling right above me. So I need to make sure that I'm slightly to the left of the ceiling so that I can force him to come over in this direction. He's going to fire and freeze the railing, but not destroy the ceiling, which is good. So I'm going to be able to do the ceiling takedown on him. There's the next takedown. So now I'm going to do the beatdown, and I need to run in this direction. This is why I said you were supposed to do the drop takedown rather than the silent takedown when you were doing the railing takedown. Because we're going to be able to do the silent takedown from the railing, and he will not get the chance to freeze it. Because obviously the railing is not in this direct line of view. So just mash triangle, and then do the silent takedown on him. The next takedown that we're going to do on him is the window takedown. So there's a window right behind me, right over there. So try to make sure that you path very close to this window so that you can influence him to come near it, and then you can press triangle. Ooh, also bear in mind, Freeze will actively fire projectiles as a way to sort of blindly shoot you. And there's the projectile right there. That's the one that will hit you just out of nowhere if you're not expecting it. So be very careful of that projectile. Right now, Freeze is trying to disrupt my opportunities to do moves I've already done, but it doesn't matter because he's right near the window, and I'm going to be able to do the beatdown on him again. So now what you're going to want to do is do the line launcher takedown, which is not really a takedown, it's more so you ride the line launcher into Freeze and just kick him, and it will actually knock him down, and take the path exactly like how I'm taking it to influence his direction. And I'm right behind him, I'm going to fire the line launcher, and he's down again. But there's one more takedown that we're going to do, and it's going to be the Great Takedown. It's crazy just how many moves the game forces you to use that you never use in any other Predator encounter. Like, this Predator encounter is designed to make you use moves that you'll never use in the other Predator encounters. So that's what definitely adds a level of difficulty your first time playing this fight. It's just how much the game wants you to use moves that you're most likely not going to be using because of the rare opportunities presented to you to use those moves. But the great takedown is one of those rare takedowns that you can do, and he's down. And that is the end of this video, but here is the blooper I was going to show where I get this scripting error for no reason. So you notice that when I took down that guy, Joker was saying his dialogue for indicating that a henchman was incapacitated, and I'm guessing that's what triggered the scripting error right here. But you'll notice, it's not saying that the Predator encounter's done. Fiona is still just cowering right there, and the music is still playing, so I'm like, what's going on? And then at some point, I try to go for the door to enter Wonder City, and the game will not let me. It just keeps cutting out my X prompts. And there's no dialogue from Batman indicating that he needs to stay in the area to protect Fiona. There's nothing. I'm just mashing X and nothing's playing. There's no dialogue, there's no door animation playing. It's just bugged. And weirdly, Fiona starts doing the scripting where she's supposed to be hiding behind this weapons crate, but the enemies are already incapacitated, and I'm still stuck in this section. So this was a very weird soft lock. But that's all I have for bloopers, and that is the end of this video. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.